Welcome back to the Rediscover the 80s podcast feed and another episode of Rank 'em, the show that remembers your favorite things from the 1980s in a fun countdown format. I am your host, Jason Gross, and joining me for tonight's podcast is a voice and face you will recognize if you watch us over there on YouTube. It's my longtime friend and frequent podcast partner, Mr. Wyatt Bloom. How are you, sir?
Doing wonderful. This has been a long time coming for the rank 'em. We haven't done these for quite a while, so I'm ready to jump in and rank some shows.
You're right. And tonight's episode actually is about a year in the making as I set out to review movies, which we did with Mr. Chatty Young from 1987. And we meant to do this TV show podcast last year for the what would have been the 30th anniversary. But what the heck? You know, we have the notes and here we are. So we're going to do our top 5 1987 TV shows, and we'll just have a great time doing that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Right. Just want to pump up my my partner here for a minute as he does come over to rediscoverthe80s.com once in a while and write some articles and even some reviews. And if you haven't been to the site, you need to check out the iconic cars of the 80s series that he started, and tell everybody a little bit about that.
Well, what started out as really an innocent kind of an update to an article I'd recently read. Well, recent being about 2 or 3 years ago since I started that article. It said it was the same title, Iconic Cars of the 80s, and it had yellow IROC Z Camaro on the front. And I'm like, you know what? There's other ones that I would call iconic. And what started out as literally looking for just a few cars turned into, wow, let's kind of expand it. We got the hatchback brigade is what I called one. We got the economy line. There was a couple other ones. I'm still actually working on it. My work kind of kept me busy, so I couldn't even follow through with a few more articles. But the whole synopsis, I got to pop it up so I get it right.
Go for it.
Great that we have our own resource. We can look at our articles.
Right.
Anyway, so the idea was, like I said, you just start out as one of the ones I affectionately liked was called the Hatchback Brigade. And it just talks about how the 80s seemed to be nothing but really the awakening of the hatchbacks. And then I go through all the small research that I got, just really a synopsis of what the cars were. Some were, exchanging, a case in point, like Chrysler. They went from one frame style with the Dodge Omni and the Plymouth Horizon, that style, to the Dodge Daytona, a whole other framework. And in fact, I didn't realize that the Daytona was a Mitsubishi underneath. That's when it started its partnership, I'll call it, with Mitsubishi. For a long time, I thought it was like an in-house Dodge competition, because they still had, at least in my car, I had an 86 Plymouth Turismo, which was also the Dodge Charger in that era. And then here comes the Dodge Daytona. So I was thinking like Dodge was doing an in-house, okay, which one's the better hatchback? Which one does better sales? Well, the Daytona has two T-tops, whereas the 2.2 guys over on the Charger and Turismo, we get the big, huge sunroofs that Jason loved to hang out of. So,
did.
yeah, so it kind of blossomed, like I said, from, like I said, just from a couple cars. I was thinking like I'd just grab a couple coupes, like the Monte Carlo, and then maybe, like I said, the hatchback. So maybe the Dodge Daytona, then a couple things. It's spawned, if I can use that word,
4 or 5 different articles there.
Right. And I think I have more than what's up here, but like I started out with the iconic cars of the 80s, which was the Coopers, so the actual two-door coupes. Then it became the economy class, and I did some affectionate photos on the front. One for my good buddy Jason, I did for the Coopers, which was his longtime racing NASCAR buddy Dale Earnhardt,
Mm-hmm.
and just went on and on to things that we knew would stand out, to even like what I called the box cars. And looking back, I know some of the late 60s had boxy type cars, even the 70s had boxy type cars, but the 80s seemed to be, I'll call it the cliche of box cars. You saw them everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of called it that era. And I just encapsulated all these cars. Like I said, it was supposed to just start out as one or two from this era, that era. And I'm like, man, now driving by, it's easy for me to see an 81 Ford LTD. I know that's an 80s car, right? You just can't miss
Right.
it, you know? Or just right recently, I've been passing by. This guy runs it like an everyday car. It's an old 1981, 82 Buick Skylark two-door. And this is, back when the Chevy Citation, that clan was around. That's the same framework. It's just a Buick, probably has better options in it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm applauding this guy. Keep it going, keep it strong. So, but yeah, I have more in my I'll call it my back pocket right now. I want to do trucks. I want to do vans. I want to do even specialty cars that kind of are unique. I'll call it for the 80s, but I'll keep that a secret until I can write my articles, which sadly I realized the last article I wrote looks like it was in 2016. So I'm a little behind.
Yeah. Well, obviously I wanted to maybe get a little spark under you here to keep that going, but it's fun as I'm going back and watching some of these television shows, and as we're now going back and doing our Rediscovered podcast on reviewing, long lost TV shows, movies, and stuff. It's fun to watch, at least for me, the vehicles and the cars that are driving around, and it was just such a unique era, and I really appreciated those articles and kind of grouping them all together and seeing how unique the 80s were for just, vehicles in general. So
yeah, like I said, I try to capture the articles on the front, kind of something either from a show or something that's easily recognizable, just like Dale Earnhardt's number 3 Intimidator, which, by the way, I saw a Chevy truck Intimidator SS here not too long ago.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, they still pay tribute to Dale.
Oh yeah,
all over the country. But okay, well, and I want also to go tell people to go out to Twitter and follow Mr. Infamous WB, as he is a big part of these podcasts. So go out and follow him, and he does tweet out some stuff too that I really haven't seen yet as well. That one that came to mind was that mansion that had the Airwolf sitting on top. You tweeted that out. I was like, oh, this is cool. This is like an actual mansion that was for sale that had like a Airwolf sitting on the roof.
that's it.
Crazy stuff like that. So go follow him over on Twitter, and let's dive into 1987 TV shows here. And before we get into our favorites, I wanted to give a little context of the 1987 American television market, I guess you'll call it. We're going to briefly go over the top 10 shows as rated by the AC Nielsen Company for the fall of 87 through the spring of 88. And those are some pretty good ones. Number 10 was The Wonder Years on ABC. I never really got into The Wonder Years. I remember, it's set, I think, back in the 50s or 60s. And I don't know, it seemed like every era has that show, that kind of throwback show to a different era. And the 80s, even with Back to the Future, you think about, they went back to the 50s, and Happy Days, that was, I think, back in the 50s as well. So a lot of these shows tend to go back a couple decades that become popular. I thought it was it's pretty cool like that. Did you watch the Wonder Years at all?
Is that no? That's not the one I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of Boy Meets World. I don't think I've ever
No,
watched the other one.
that was yeah, that was 90s, I think, Boy Meets World. But Wonder Years was Fred Savage, and he went on and he was in a couple movies, The
No.
Wizard, and he was the little boy in Princess Bride that was reading the book, and what else? He was in Little Monsters too. I think that was early 90s. But yeah, Fred Savage on the Wonder Years. Number 8 was Murder, She Wrote. I remember catching up an episode here and there over at my grandmother's house on, I believe it was Sunday nights. It was like after football and after 60 Minutes, which is actually number 8 on this list. Those were two, I think, of CBS's pretty much top of the heap as far as shows go. 60 Minutes and Murder, She Wrote. I guess it could have been because it was after football, but anyway, well, I haven't revisited that at all. Number 7 on NBC was Night Court. Now, I have gone back and watched some Night Court. Have not watched the full series, but you've got some on DVD, don't you?
I think I'm up to season 2, maybe 3. And I know I've said it time and time again, but the one that stands out is the one that I remember watching when you and I were kids, and that's the one with the turtle syndrome dude that walks in and takes forever to walk in and even to speak. And I've been looking for that, and I need to go out and get some more DVDs so I can find that stinking episode. I think it was the most hilarious episode I've seen.
Yeah, there was. Oh my gosh, I just loved that show, and it was obviously a little over the top for me as a teenager, as a kid. It was all the Dan Fielding, innuendo and jokes.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I was really sad that Harry Anderson passed away here recently, and I loved him on that show. I actually watched a lot of Dave's World.
Same
if you
here.
remember that show?
Oh yeah.
In the that was like the mid 90s.
Actually, it was more early 90s. It was while we were in high school, just before we basically went on to our adult years.
Right. He played what's the author? Is it Dave Barry? I want to say.
Yeah.
So that was a fun show, sitcom, and I was sad that he passed away.
You know what's funny though? Me and looking at TV shows, right? That same set that they've used for Dave's World, I have seen.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, countless times now. I'm like, they must really like that setup.
With the stairs in the background going up the second floor, and the couch
in the background on the right in the living room, I'll call it.
Yeah.
And the kitchen's always in the left-hand side. I've seen it.
Right.
I was trying to keep a mental list, and I've, of course, bombed it. But I'm like, man, they must have really liked. Everybody seems to like this set.
Yeah. Same kind of setup. A lot of shows. Number 6, Who's the Boss? Now, that was on ABC. I remember Who's the Boss. Did not watch it very often.
I watched it a few times for one reason, but never. I'll say, even as fascinated as I am, I didn't cling to it. No pun intended. But it just didn't. The show itself never grabbed me. Just her. So yeah.
Alyssa Milano. Yes. Number 4 on NBC, The Golden Girls. Now, I do remember watching The Golden Girls quite a bit, again, over at my grandmother's house. She loved to stay up late. She was a night owl and loved to watch all of the old reruns, The Jeffersons, All in the Family. And, of course, Golden Girls weren't in the rerun then, but she loved The Golden Girls. So I remember watching quite a few of those episodes in its original run. Have not watched a lot since.
Sorry to interject, but did you just jump over 5? Growing Pains?
I did. All right, let me go back. And then number 5 is Growing Pains on ABC. Another one of those shows I remember catching an episode here or there, maybe even in syndication. after it was done with its original run, but not one of those go-to shows.
Same here. I like you. I've watched it here and there, and in syndication, flipping through channels on TBS or something, but that's about it.
Right. And then number 4, Golden Girls on NBC. This was another one I remember watching over at my grandmother's house. She loved those sitcoms, and she would stay up late watching reruns of The Jeffersons and Sanford and Son and All in the Family. I can't remember. It might have been on WPIX. I
probably.
It was one of those probably cable channels that ran the reruns. But yeah, she loved the Golden Girls, and right after that, I think it was Empty Nest at some point.
I think so. Yeah.
I remember going back to back with those. Haven't revisited since, really.
I watched Golden Girls quite a bit. I won't say I was on it every week, but I know it's quite often because I love that comedy and just everything going back and forth, especially, you know, them picking on poor old Sophia and what's her name? Rose. Yeah, that was.
Yeah,
I can say it all of. Oh, shut up. That kind of thing.
Yeah, Dorothy loved to pick on Rose, and and I loved Estelle Getty, her mom on this show. I think she cracked me up the most.
Oh yeah.
And piggybacking off that, I remember renting several times the movie Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. Do you remember that movie with Sylvester Stallone?
Once, but I remember her being in it.
It's
still just the same kind of character as she was on Golden Girls, just without the gray wig.
Right. And it had to have been early 90s when that came out, but I guess you could say that was a guilty pleasure watching that movie. Mm-hmm. Number 3, Cheers on NBC. I have gone back and watched the first probably season and a half of Cheers in the last couple years. Every once in a while when it was on Netflix, might still be over there now. I'd put on an episode, and I liked the earlier Cheers, but I remember watching episodes kind of along the way. It was on for several seasons, maybe 8 or 9 seasons, it seems like. And enjoyed Woody was one of my favorite characters, but obviously Norm, who was there the whole time. Norm and Cliff coming in, those were probably my favorite characters on the show. Did you watch Cheers?
Not very often. It was one of those hit or miss ones. I really not. I guess nothing ever grabbed me, so I never got into it.
Mm-hmm. And then the number 1 and number 2 shows we'll kind of announce together. Number 1 was The Cosby Show, followed by A Different World, which I believe actually debuted in '87. And those were run back to back on Thursday nights. And I watched a lot of The Cosby Show, a lot in reruns as well. And just throughout the early 90s in high school. And I remember going back and watching those shows again, mainly over at my grandmother's house. I seemed to be over there a lot. She would pick me up after school or something, but Cosby Show. Yeah. I love the Cosby Show. And it was a natural transition for, I think it's Denise was the older daughter.
Yes. That was Lisa Bonet.
Yes. Went to college, so that's where we got A Different World, and that had some fun characters on there. The girl with the southern accent, I can't remember what her name was off the top of my head now, and Dwayne, his name with the round glasses. I do remember watching that show.
Herdison, yeah.
Yes, you got it.
Trying to think who southern accent would have been played by. The only thing I can see up here, I have the list out here. Marissa Tomei.
No.
Played a Maggie.
No. It was one of the African American girls.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. What did you watch the Cosby Show? And
I watched both. I had to remember what A Different World was, but once I saw Lisa Bonet, I remember I watched it right after Cosby Show. I kept it was kind of like uh, I know there's no likeness, but it's kind of like the Saved by the Bell and Saved by the Bell college years. I watched both. To me, I had to complete the the show or the see what was going on afterwards. So I remember watching it. I don't remember much of it, but I do remember watching it pretty regularly because I actually liked both Cosby and
Yeah. It was Jasmine Guy. She played Whitley.
okay, yeah.
And Sinbad was on that show too as the coach. So I remember that as well. I love
I
Sinbad.
don't remember.
I loved his stand up.
I don't remember Sinbad specifically. I remember there being a coach, but I don't remember Sinbad being the coach.
Okay. Well, that's the top 10 of 1987, and just a few fun little we'll say firsts or happenings in 1987 television. I'm just going to give you a few little fun facts, we'll say, to break the ice. And as soon as my computer will let me scroll again. Come on. Thank you. Okay. Now, 1987 was when Remington Steele resumed on NBC after Pierce Brosnan was recruited and won the role of James Bond. And then NBC, I guess, unexpectedly renewed the television series and essentially made him come back to the show and wait on James Bond, which would be a few years before he would get back into that role. So that was the beginning of 1987 when that all went down. We had the whole televangelist Jim Baker episode or scandal, I guess you would say. That all went down in 1987. This was a fun one. A couple facts about The Price is Right. It surpassed Concentration as the longest running daytime game show in history in 1987. And 1987 was also the first year that Bob Barker came out with his gray hair. Yep. He stopped dyeing his hair.
I remember that episode too, because I remember them making fun of his, was it the big, huge dollar bill? Because it was still dark hair. And he said something to the effect of, I think we need to update this picture on here, or something to that effect.
Right. And they gave him like a standing ovation. Yeah, it was great. That was a great moment in history.
Oh yeah.
This is also the year that Fox made its debut as a television network, and we'll get to one of those shows at least tonight. But this was the year that Fox made its debut, the Tracey Ullman Show, and of course that spawned The Simpsons, which is probably the longest running show in history that's not like a daytime soap opera or something. So that was a pretty big deal. And then let's see, what was another one here we want to throw out? The long-running show that Dick Clark hosted, American Bandstand, it had its last episode, which was its 2,751st episode on ABC. This is after 30 years, and then it would continue to run in syndication, but this was its last year for broadcast TV. So that was a kind of an end of an era there. And then let's see. Let's give you maybe one more.
What I found was interesting because I used to watch this guy, and my son was listening to one of these spoofs, for Thomas the Train, and I hear the intro, and I had not heard this intro since the TV show. And when I heard it, I'm like, I think that's Mr. Belvedere. And sure enough, I did some research, and that was the show. And here it was canceled this same year on May 6th
Yeah.
after 3 seasons. I liked old Mr. Belvedere. It was just a fun little.
Yeah. It
There's a
was
little
different.
sarcasm, if I remember right. It's been since
Oh
I
yeah.
haven't watched it since then, so I could be completely wrong. But I remember there being some sarcasm in that.
Yeah, he pretty much told it like it is, and he called people out. If I do remember right, it was, I don't know, it's kind of played off, I guess, on his British, background or lifestyle or whatever. But yeah, he was pretty brash with the family. I guess kind of in the same way. If you remember the show Benson,
Oh, loved it. I loved
the way
that lady that would always scream out, "I can still hear you."
yeah, well, he was always that way with the governor. So I don't know if that was kind of in the same, same wheelhouse there. But yeah, no, that's a great pull that Mr. Belvedere came to an end on that one. So, well, we are, let's go ahead and get into our lists. And just for clarification, we are going to do just television shows without no animation. We'll maybe do another show for all the cartoons that debuted in 1987. So we're going to just do our favorite shows. And again, the ground rules for rank them are pretty much just our personal favorites. So this is not what we think should be at the top of a list, or what maybe, okay, well, this pulled in a lot of viewers, so I got to put this. No, it's just basically our personal preference, our favorite shows that debuted in 1987. And I'll give you the floor first, sir. What was your number 5 choice?
Well, I don't know if you remember this show. I certainly do. I don't know why it fascinated me, but I liked it anyway.
Uh-huh.
I guess there's no intro. Rescue 911.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sorry, I was trying to mix it in a little bit with this, but I got little segments. I don't have the show. But what's funny is I went back here just the last year. I went back and watched, Star Trek, the original series.
Mm-hmm.
And watching Rescue 911, I could not 100% place where I had seen old Captain Kirk, where he was actually, I couldn't place him. I'm like, I've seen this somewhere. I've seen his face. William Shatner. That's the name I was trying to think of, but not think of where it was. And then here I am 30 some years later. I'm like, oh, no. Okay. Now I know.
Bingo.
Yep. Bingo. So a little delayed.
Oh, I remember that show. My dad loved that show.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I guess, pseudo reality for the time it was in, but it was basically reenactments of, things that happened, emergencies and all that. But he loved that show. And then he would watch an episode and it would be some kid that got stuck in a drainage pipe or something, and they had to, dig and cut him out. And then he would turn to me and go, all right, don't ever do something stupid like that. And don't ever crawl through drain. He used it as like a tool to, look at me and tell me not to do what just transpired,
Right.
on the television. So I definitely was not one of my favorite shows, just for that fact that it put something in my dad's brain about something stupid that somebody did and how my son could somehow repeat that, So I remember the show well. As far as number 5 for me, this was a show that was very intriguing, had an awesome theme song, but most of the time just scared the crap out of me. And that was Unsolved Mysteries. Unsolved Mysteries, of course, hosted by Robert Stack. It had there was the missing persons type cases. And then there was always like a alien UFO, sighting somewhere. And then there was like the ghost, stories. And those ones like freaked me out the most. And it was always on seemingly at the darkest time of the night. And if you're watching it by yourself, you're like totally freaked out. Uh, my wife and we actually went back just, I think it was early part of this year, and started watching some of the episodes that they had put on Amazon. And it's fun to watch them now, 30 years later. They're not so scary, and the acting is cheesy for the most part. But they've updated everything. So if a case hadn't been solved, or if it had been solved in the last 30 years, they'll tack that on at the very end of each little mini part of the episode. So every segment of the episode. So it's kind of fun. We enjoyed watching it, and we started season 1, and I don't know, we might just, watch an episode here and there now. But did you watch Unsolved Mysteries? I think I lost your audio.
I did. I remember listening to Robert Stack just do his that creepy intro, trying to be kind of monotone, but you could almost it's just weird. But
Ultra Magnus.
That. I'm sorry.
He was Ultra Magnus.
That's what I was going to just get to. I'm like, then I heard him like on the Transformers, the original movie, and you hear him on Ultra. I'm like, wow, he's dynamic. Oh, he's creepy. And then I love when he's like saying, "Dang it, open!" He's like, did they just cuss in this movie? Holy cow!
Yeah.
And then of course the basically the icing on the cake when we were watching. Remember the old Beavis and Butthead movie?
Oh my gosh! Yes.
They're just
yeah.
Okay, it's hilarious. I'm not a fan of that type of language. But yeah,
I forgot he was in there.
I'll give it that it was, but I'm like, you do that? I thought you were just some dude that just scares the crap out of us every Friday night or whatever night it was.
Like you're just an announcer or a cop or something, whatever. Oh, yeah, I forgot he had that little cameo in there. Oh, funny stuff. All right, what's your number 4, sir?
Number 4, something we actually just covered.
I'll patch it in.
Okay. So we got the Highwayman series.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know. I only watched one episode. I was thrilled to buy it. But it was not, it was just, after rewatching it here just recently, I'm like, why did I miss this? How did I miss this? Why did I not watch it? Mm-hmm. I was late on the scene. My dad told me about it at episode 8. And there's 10 episodes, including the pilot. So I had one more really left, and I think it was done. If I remember right, no, 2 more. So it was, but I loved it. I loved that feel, and I'm not going to take away from our other podcast. You gotta watch all the other podcasts and listen. But it was still, you got the Knight Rider, you got the vehicle that was the star, and that's what I miss nowadays, where the car is the star. I miss that piece that used to be part of the 80s. That's why I was so thrilled when Viper came out in 92. I'm like, we got a supercar.
Yeah.
It's a Dodge finally. Yay. Well, not finally, I guess General Lee was a Dodge. But still, I mean, we get our supercar. So that was mine. I'm sorry,
it makes sense. I mean, every TV show back in the day had the main character or main characters had their car. Like you said, the Dukes, even Daisy and Uncle Jesse and Cooter. I mean, you knew all their cars. The A-Team van, Simon and Simon, everyone, Riptide had that huge pink, rescue chopper. It seemed like every show had their vehicle. Miami Vice. I mean, Oh gosh. But anyway, there's a lot of that's lost. I actually just watched the trailer I don't know if you've seen it yet. The trailer for the new Magnum PI series that's
I
debuting.
haven't watched it, but I just saw the headline come across Twitter today.
Yes.
I'm kind of interested in this one.
They if they wreck as many Ferraris as they did in the trailer, he's going to have like a new car every episode.
Oh, geez.
But they gave him like a new one, and then he had to go back and he pulled out the old, what is it, the GTS from the original Magnum PI show that made an appearance.
Oh, wow.
That thing gets demolished. It gets demolished and pushed off a cliff in the trailer, and then they give him a new ride after that. So it's I understand. Well, they did keep CT's helicopter and that same paint scheme. So I was happy to see that. So we'll see. I'm interested to watch it and see if how the vehicles play into that show, because that was part of it too. I love watching them go on the little mystery hunts and with CT's helicopter and needed, and then of course the Ferrari that he always drove. But anyway, yeah, I mean, Highwayman, that was again one of those two rigs, helicopters coming out, Lotus is coming out the back, at least for the pilot, and it was fun to rewatch that show.
Nice.
My number 4, I'm going a little in the opposite direction, I guess. And this was a kid-based show that was on PBS. It's called Square One TV. This was a fun show. It was almost like Saturday Night Live for kids. It was a lot of sketches, a lot of little segments throughout the show. It had like little game shows they would do. They would do one called, I think it was called Piece of the Pie. It was more of like a Family Feud type setup. And then they had other ones that were it was all based on math and learning, a lot of math in the show. They had one of my favorite segments was Math Man, who was like Pac-Man, but he solved little math problems as he's going through the maze. And they had the evil Mr. Glitch, who was kind of like the ghost, but he was like a tornado. I don't know why these things stick in my head, but I love the show. The segment, probably my favorite segment was Mathnet, where they played off of Dragnet, and the two would go out and they would solve math crimes. Like, it's been so long since I watched an episode, but I love Square One TV. I remember coming home watching that in the afternoons after school was over, and it would suck me in for, I guess it was probably a 30-minute show. But each little segment was just a few minutes and, made the whole episode. There was another, they had a cartoon character called Dirk Niblick and of the Math Brigade. I remember that. And I mean, it was just, I don't know. It was just one of those shows that I just loved to death. Do you remember Square One TV at all?
I do. We had PBS, and it was quite prevalent in our area. So yeah, I remember Square One. I don't remember Mathnet, but I remember quite a bit about it. It was not one of my. I mean, I've watched it probably, but it wasn't one of my top 5, obviously.
Yeah, Mathnet. You had the actors were Joe Howard and Beverly Leach as George Franklin and Kate Monday, and then there was another one that replaced her. She's been in a lot of like commercials and stuff. That was Tuesday. I can't remember. Pat Tuesday. Tony DeBuno. That's her name. But anyway, that was I don't know. That's just one that I really enjoyed as a kid. And I've gone back and showed little segments of Math Man to my kids on YouTube, but that's about as far as I've gotten to re-watching the show. All right, let's go up to number 3. What's your number 3 pick?
Well, Mine is it's supposed to be playing through. Sorry. I should have speeded up. It's Star Trek, The Next Generation. I am a Trekkie. I'm not a Star Wars. You can hate me now. Jason will hate me now. But I just like the fascination that you get to see more stuff going on with space travel and all that. I'm not a big fan on, well, Star Wars is the best way to put it, where it seems to be nothing but saber sword fights. The spaceships are all shooting at each other. There's a little bit of drama in between, but every story is about the same to me. I just don't get into it. I'm sorry, Jason, but I like Star Trek because you get them visiting other alien worlds. You get them to learning about them. Most of the time they're bad guys, so they shoot them up anyway. They get the photon torpedoes and shields up and all that, but there is the in between going on a what would theoretically be a starship. What the drama, red alert, battle stations, and all that. I love that fascination. And there's one movie, I can't remember which one it is. Riker's at the control. And this one I laughed out loud because this was like too corny. They're in dire need. The ship's like going down, no controls are working, and then he goes to manual override, and a little joystick, like a toy joystick you'd have on your old laptops back in the day, pops up, and he goes manual control and just on this podium. Like, are you kidding me? There's not. Okay, that one was lame, but it was hilarious. Like, okay, at least they thought a manual control override. There's no gas pedal. There's no nothing. So how do you even control the thing?
You got your Atari 2600 hooked up to it, right?
It was like one step above, but not by much. It had a button on top. But I'm like, okay, at least they thought this through. So I liked it. I liked old Star Trek, both the old and the Next Generation. I even watched the Voyager when it came out. I liked it pretty well. What about you? Well, your number 3, or what did you think about Star Trek?
Well, I've mainly watched the movies, and I haven't really watched much of the television shows. I've watched an episode here or there over the years, but I've never really gotten into Star Trek. I'm, of course, the Star Wars person, as you say, and I was more sucked into that world. But I can appreciate it and understand why you like it more, because you can do a lot more with a series that went on for several years, and you have hundreds of episodes probably to its name. And pretty much if you were an actor the time that Star Trek The Next Generation was on, you had a guest part in there, because I know you could probably do a whole podcast on just the guest stars and episodes on The Next Generation.
Oh yeah, there's countless. I mean, our buddy Murdoch, Dwight Schultz was
right.
regular, not so much on Next Generation. He went to Deep Space Nine, but he still showed up there. Amy Allen was on there from 18. I know so many people on that show. I watched it like twice through here this last year. I'm like, man, there's just so many, people. I swear it was like the catch-all. Like, okay, I'm out of work. Can you hook me up here? It was just seemed like that.
Yeah.
Even Bonnie was on there.
Yeah.
I had to dig to find her, but I saw her. Bonnie from Night Rider was there.
Yeah.
I can't remember which episode, but it was. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know Night Rider's over, but that's bad.
You think about the cast itself. You had Mr. Reading Rainbow there, LeVar Burton.
Oh yeah.
It's so yeah. I mean, it was just one of those shows that. Have you done your Star Trek episode yet? It's like the talk around the water cooler at some agency where the actors meet. Anyway, but yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum, but can appreciate the show. Number 3 for me, I'm sticking in the kids' world, and I'm going with the Nickelodeon show called Finders Keepers. And Finders Keepers was like a kids game show, and you essentially you had two teams. The first part of the show was you had this picture, like a hidden picture, and you had to they give you clues, and you had to circle it on your little teleprompter when you found it in the hidden picture, and you got points, and you got I can't remember how you got to the searching the rooms, but you had this like 2-story set, and there were several different rooms, probably I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 total, that they would go to, and the host would give you a clue, and you had to find whatever you thought he was talking about in this clue. And kids would just, I mean, this was just like the ultimate show and premise for a kid who would just love to trash their room, but would obviously have consequences with the parents. So, but it was fun that they would just dive in, and they would hide the things wherever. And then they had like fun little themed rooms. Like there was like the Egyptian room, and there was the dungeon, and there was Frankenstein's laboratory, you had the bathroom, and they would hide stuff in the toilet and the sink, and you'd have to dig through there. It was almost like Double Dare, but with just the whole, the obstacle course is the show. But loved Finders Keepers as a kid, and just watching these kids tear through these rooms was really fun to watch. Do you remember that show?
I remember watching it in pieces, but it was not one that was in my constant wheelhouse. Not like yours, but I do remember it.
I watched a lot of Nickelodeon as a kid.
I watched like a fair amount, but I just don't remember that one. At least in my everyday.
Okay, well that's fine. What was your number 2, sir? We're getting towards the end here.
My number 2 is the one and only Married with Children. Love me some old Al Bundy. Loved one of the favorite episodes that I have is a testament to how new Fox was on the market. And the whole family goes, "Okay, everybody, assume Fox viewing positions," and they all like have canes and aerials and coat hangers and all over the place trying to watch Fox News or Fox anything. So it was hilarious. I loved old Al Bundy. He was probably the antithesis of the American father, family man.
Yeah.
But there was something about it that drew me. I knew it was all fake, so I knew I wasn't. I mean, he was no role model by any means,
right?
But it was the fun of just the banter back and forth, the constant stuff with them jeering at each other, the neighbors.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Steve and Marcy.
Marcy.
Oh, I love them going back at each other.
Oh, what was his name?
Oh yeah. It'll come to us.
Yeah, it was. I think he was more of a dunce than he was supposed to be. It was just the comedy of all of it. The stunts, like Al Bundy falling off the roof and just his yell. Ah! And I still remember they had this on the reunion, and I still remember like they had to take like, I don't know, they said something like 4 or 5 takes so that everybody could calm down and get the take right. And you still see when Santa hits, falls, you still see old Ed O'Neill, Al Bundy going just a real quick, like he's having to wipe the smile off because he wants to laugh at this. Yeah. Just the whole thing. And then, the family man, even though he drove a freaking Plymouth, he always called it the family Dodge. So it was fun to see my old, even though it was trashed, according to them, piece of junk Dodge. I loved it. I just loved old Ed O'Neill. In fact, I was on a date many, many years ago, it was many years ago before Julie. And we happened to be in a restaurant, and the girl's mother was there with us, Italian restaurant. And all of a sudden totally me. The song plays over the speakers. No idea what happened. No idea what the conversation was after that. Because the whole time I'm sitting there going, "Love and marriage." I was singing the whole thing. I don't know what they were talking about. I was lost. But it was awesome. What about you? What do you remember about old Married with Children and Al Bundy and the whole gang?
Well, let me tell you what I remember about Married with Children. After I tell you my number 2 pick.
Okay.
My number 2 on my list is MTV's Remote Control. I guess I've got game shows on the brain for some reason, but
well, that is a setup for one of our next memory joggers. Just saying.
True. Yeah, we are gonna go through our favorite game shows, but MTV's Remote Control was so much fun. It was just an unconventional game show. You know, the contestants sat in their like, easy chairs as they, answered the questions on this like old fashioned TV set. Was the game board, and they chose a channel. And it would be, like TV trivia and music trivia, movie trivia. And once in a while you'd have one of the people on the show. I mean, it was hosted by Ken Ober, but you had like other people. It seemed like they were just pulling people off the street that would come in and like either act out the question or do like a little skit. And I think this was one of Adam Sandler's early appearances, was being on this show. And you had Colin Quinn and probably Dennis Leary, some of those MTV type people that would come on and do the funny little skit. And as they got through the show, and then they had the snack break where they held the bowl over their heads and they would get like pieces of ham that would fall out, or popcorn, or it was just like random stuff. It seemed like. I don't even know if half of it was edible. And then, once they got through that, well, the other fun part too was when each round they would get rid of one of the contestants, and they, their chair would like go through a wall behind them, or they'd get launched or whatever. They would have their little moment to exit the show. And that was always fun. And then the bonus round at the end, you would always be on this Craftmatic adjustable bed. And you had like, I think it was maybe 10 TV screens that were turned every which way. And there was a number on each one. And they would show you a music video on each different screen. You had to kind of turn your head to see some of these. Some of them were like upside down, I think. And you had to go through and pick out, that's Duran Duran Rio, and that's, Peter Gabriel Sledgehammer, and number 3 is Run DMC and Aerosmith Walk This Way. And you had to go through and identify each music video, and you'd win a whatever trip to Disneyland at the end, or whatever they were giving away. But I don't know. It was just a fun show. It was a nice little break in between, the music videos, as MTV eventually got rid of them all together. But back then, you had these little half-hour shows that would pop up once in a while. And love Remote Control. I remember the Nintendo game. I actually bought a copy last year just to play it with some friends of mine, and loved MTV Remote Control.
Nice.
So that was my my number 2. Did you watch Remote Control at all, MTV?
Not really. MTV was not something I watched in the 80s. It was closer to I'll call it the early 90s before I started really watching MTV. I don't think it was actually part of our package, to be honest. I think we didn't have it until it was early 90s when we were on the satellite dish, and that's how I grabbed MTV.
Gotcha. Okay, sir, we're at number 1. I kind of hinted at what mine is, but go ahead with yours.
All righty. We got to do it.
Cute, huh? This is my dad, and this is my dad. How'd I get 2 dads? They inherited me. Congratulations. It's a girl.
If you don't know what this is, this is My 2 Dads.
Yes, sir. I knew that
That
was
is
coming.
my favorite show, primarily for the little girl. Well, now big girl, Stacy Keenan, who is one that captured my heart. Sorry, Julie. Back in the day, if you've heard on podcasts before, she really got it. But then I got actually sucked into the show. So the girl was the bait, I'll call it, but it was actually a great show. You had um, Greg Evigan and
Paul Reiser.
It was they were just a fun bunch, really. Uh, I had it pulled up. I don't know what happened to my list. They're playing all the two dads, and back in the day that was kind of almost a taboo trial because the presumption, if you weren't aware of what the show was about, was two gay guys. But the whole thing was you got two people that essentially knocked up the same woman, but they don't have the DNA test to figure out whose kid she is, and mama's dying or dead, and here's Nicole getting custody into two dads, and the judge, who is played by Florence Stanley, she basically sets them up and tells them to basically be the parents for her. And that Paul Reiser's comedy, I know a lot of it was probably scripted, but the way he executed it was just hilarious. And then bouncing it off of Greg Evigan, it actually worked out. He was the artist that basically had no job, and he came up with the funky, cool furniture. He had the bicycle table. He had that armchair, which is looked like the front end of an old Ford Coupe or something like that. It was just cool what he would kind of make up as they went. But yeah, that was my show. I actually came across this season 1. I guess it's been a few years now, but I started watching it just to see it. I'm like, this was hilarious. Dick Butkus, one of the football greats back in the day, he filled in there as well. In fact, the judge, kind of piggyback on her again, she got kind of a reputation because everybody knew she was judge. She delivered that that character very well, and I think she got picked up on it seems around in my mind she got picked up as a judge, played different name but same judge in a different sitcom, like one-off afterwards. But yeah, I've been fascinated with Stacy. Obviously, you've heard our podcast enough, but this show was actually great. It wasn't that she sucked me in, but it turned out great. Just like she sucked me in with the newest one, the Step by Step that she was on, and it turned out to be a decent show. So I started watching it too, not just for her, but she added to it.
Yeah, well, and I obviously it was not a show that I watched very often.
I know you're
I do like Paul Reiser now. Paul Reiser, he's still going strong. Like he was in the second season of Stranger Things this past year.
Oh, I need to watch that series.
You really do. It's a fun little trip. It's it's a little on the edgy side and as far as like horror and sci-fi, but it's so good. And he had a part in that. He's also in a show called Red Oaks, which is on Amazon, that I have watched now. I think it's up to the 3rd season. It was only like maybe 5 or 6 episodes, and it's kind of trailed off, but he plays he's in that show as well, and I love his character in there. It's kind of like it's set in the 80s. It's almost got like a Caddyshack type feel. They're at this country club, and he is one of the he's like the president of the club for a while, and he has to go to jail because I think they get him for tax evasion or something. Anyway, he plays a fun character in that show, so I appreciate him. And what was the show that he was in forever with what's her face? Gosh, it ran forever. I think it was an NBC show. I'm gonna have to look it up now because he crap. it just kind of left me. It wasn't one that I watched a whole lot of back in the day, but I know it ran for a long time. Mad About You. Mad About You.
Yeah.
So he was on that several seasons. I think he might even him or Helen Hunt, who played his counterpart in there, might have won some Emmys and lots of awards. And I know it was a pretty popular show.
Yeah.
So yeah, more fan of him, I guess, than the show itself. But I knew that one was coming. You and Stacey Keenan, I knew that was coming. Okay, well, time. Well, time to get to my number one, and like I alluded to before, it is Married with Children. That show was prompted to me mainly by my dad, and I think his appeal was probably 50-50 with Al and his antics with the family, and then of course Kelly and all of the hot girls that they would bring on there, every episode. And it got to the point where, okay, when is the hot girl going to come in? If you were looking away, all you had to do was hear the crowd in the background when Kelly or one of them would come on stage. But there's just so much to love about that show, just the way that Bud always, nudges Kelly into stuff and just totally makes fun of her. And she's just oblivious, to his little antics most of the time. And then, oh gosh, Al going into work at the shoe store and all of his little counters there with with the patrons.
Yeah.
And he just, again, he held nothing back. He was in hell. He was in, he was in the, probably the lowest job on the planet, and he didn't care. So when some of those ladies would come in, there's a reel on YouTube I watched recently, and I just laughed and laughed and laughed for however long it was, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, just of him, berating these people. And it's something you can't get away with today, obviously. No. And that's what made it so, even back then, it was just so eye-opening. Whoa, they can do that on TV,
right?
Stuff like that. And that's what Fox was when it first came on the air. It pushed the envelope and then mailed it and shipped it to, wherever. It was just one of those edgy shows, and it was just fun, Al just in seemingly pain, and he'd come in and plop down the couch and stick his hand down his pants there in the front, and Peg would hit him with something. He was just like, oh, really? Just give me some peace. Just give me some peace and quiet. That's all he wanted. But he never got it. And then, Marcy and Steve next door, Marcy especially, she was always on him about stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It was just a fun show that I have gone back and watched some. I don't own it on DVD, but I have watched it since its original run in reruns and stuff. And I think you own probably the whole series, don't you?
I do. I was on that DVD craze when it hit, and I bought every single, I think, 7 seasons of it.
Wow.
I love me. And what I used to do back in the day was actually sit with back in the day with a VCR and a little TV tube here and record all the sound bites that I thought were funny into the computer. And I need to be doing that again, because I still have a few that I still play with Jason quite a bit. Like,
yes. Don't look back the next time I ask you to open the garage door for me either. Because if you do, you might see the mighty Dodge emblem bearing down on you.
My lips. Don't tax beer.
Son, I see you're hurting. So I want to say this to you, and I want to say it sincerely. Blah, blah. Gotcha. Son, I see you're hurting.
Oh, yeah. That was another part of Al that, the whole premise for the show is, he's this high school football star, and he's set out to, conquer the world, and then Peg happens and he's pregnant, and starts the family, and doesn't get to embark on his high school career, and even his bowling. Oh my gosh, watching Al Bundy, I modeled myself after Al for years in high school. You get the ball, you hold it up, you give it a little. No, you gotta wipe it down a little bit with the hand, and he's got to kind of caress it a little bit, and then you just let it go, turn around real quick, stay right, and then the pins fall down. There's just little stuff like that you pulled out from the show that it stuck with you over the years.
Oops, I wasn't supposed to play.
So yeah, and those sound bits are.
I still do it
to gold
every now and then. We'll be pre or post game on this, and I'll play a few on here.
Son, I see you're hurting.
It's still going. I don't know what I did.
Shut up, Peg.
That's it.
Yeah, that one gets me every time. And then even when it was in Wayne's World, when he was the owner of the diner or whatever, and he had that little part where he talked to the camera, I'm like, this is Al,
I'm sure I've seen it. I'm sure I picked him out when it happened, but I guess it's been so long since I've seen Wayne's World. I don't remember this scene.
Oh yeah, he's in there, and he probably got stereotyped as that character for the rest of his career after that. But
he did. I didn't know he was a cop or played a cop before he played on Married with Children, and then I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I remember very vividly. This was probably 2000, maybe 2001. He was the star of the reboot of Dragnet on, I think it was on ABC. I loved the theme song on that, the remake of that theme song. And I think it only lasted maybe one season or two, but he did the whole Joe Friday narration, at the beginning of each episode, and it was just kind of like a CSI type show. Ethan Embry was his partner, and it was great. And it was kind of funny that Ethan Embry was his partner. They were both in that movie Dutch. Have you ever seen Dutch?
No.
Oh my gosh, dude, I can't believe you haven't seen Dutch. We got to put that on the list. It's been a while since I watched that. But yeah, so that show, when that was rebooted, I remember me and my wife watching that religiously each week, and it was great. We both loved it, but it didn't last very long. So that was one time where he got kind of out of that Al Bundy character. He was actually a cop, and the drama, you're just waiting for him to drop a line, but he never does. It was more just kind of in passing, but it was great. It was a great show. But anyway, that's about it for our list. You want to do some quick honorable mentions?
Well, I guess there wasn't too many honorable mentions for me.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Full House debuted. It was a hit or miss for me. Didn't watch it quite all that much. I mean, I knew the characters. I knew enough of them. I knew the twins, but it was not my wheelhouse by any means.
Yeah, same here.
I'm scrolling through the list because I don't remember.
Well, the ones that I put down, a couple of them were on your list. Obviously, the Highwayman and Rescue 911. I did have that as an honorable mention. Most of mine were game shows. Again, broken record here. Win, Lose, or Draw, that debuted. I remember watching that a lot. Was it Burt Convy, I think, was the host, and Burt Reynolds was always on there, and who was the other ones there? They had a few, handful that were just always the celebrity guests on the show. So I remember watching Win, Lose, or Draw. There's also another kid show called I'm Telling that's just ingrained in my brain. And it was mainly a brother-sister team, if I do remember correctly, going against another team, brother-sister. And they would, I think, maybe answer questions or trivia or something. But the end game is what I remembered. It was like this half-circle platform of prizes. And they had one of those old kind of red police lights, you know, at each one with a button. And at the end of the game, if you were the winner, you went up and you like picked, I think there was like 10 choices for the girl and 10 choices for the boy. And you picked for your brother or sister which prizes that they thought they would personally want. And if you got it right, then the light lit up. And anyway, go look up I'm Telling if you don't remember that one. I remember watching that. That was like I think it was like a Saturday morning, like late Saturday morning show. And then another one that I'll end my honorable mentions with was a game show called Bumper Stumpers. Now, this one was very, very unique. And I remember watching this mainly on the USA Network when they ran all their game show reruns in the afternoon. This was probably in the 90s. But Bumper Stumpers was license plates. And it was like kind of like vanity plates, you know, when you're driving down the road and you're trying to figure out, well, what does this license plate say? They made a whole game show out of it. I think it came out of Canada. And I don't know why it just sucked me in, but trying to figure out those plates, and I don't even remember much about, you know, the show itself and how, you know, people won prizes and stuff. I just remember that was a game show I watched a lot of. Anything else for you before we wrap?
Not really. I think we pretty well covered it. I know the next episode we want to do is probably the cartoons.
Yeah, I do want to do the cartoons, and you know, maybe we'll jump into 1988 since we're at the 30th anniversary this year, or we can stick there, whatever we want to do. Trying to get a couple other guests actually on the show as well to do movies and maybe jump into something other than what we could watch, music or, you know, something like that. So if you're interested, if you like the podcast or something, you want to hit me up, Jason at rediscoverthe80s.com, and I'll get you on one of these rank 'em shows, and we can have a little fun with that. But in the meantime, thank you, sir, for joining me tonight, as you always do, it seems like.
Anytime. You know, I'm always available for any type of trip down memory lane.
Right. So go follow Wyatt over there, Infamous WB on Twitter, and go check out his Iconic Cars article series on rediscoverthe80s.com. And thank you, sir, for joining us. And we will sign off for now for Rank 'em, and hope you will join us again next time, and check out the other shows in our feed now. The new Rediscovered show, and then, of course, the Memory Jogger podcast. We're going to be getting back into that soon as well. So go check those out on the feed. Check us out on YouTube. And if you watch us on YouTube and you're not listening to the podcast, go listen to the podcast, because I do a little bit of production work in there to make them fun to listen to as well. So, but anyway, this is Jason signing off for now, and we'll see you next time right here on Rank 'em.